The electric vehicle movement is in full swing in Australia, and with more car makers broadening their portfolios, we can only expect this paradigm shift to continue. This is Audi's original EV proponent. It's called the e-tron SUV, and it's been on sale in Australia since late 2020. Now, the German car maker has since broadened its portfolio. It's got the e-tron S, and it will soon have the e-tron EV, among a swag of other new variants. But we've had this particular car in the car sales garage for the past couple of months. Let me show you what it's all about. The e-tron is one of several European electric SUVs now available in Australia, joining the likes of the Jaguar I-Pace, Tesla Model X, and growing EV portfolios from BMW and Mercedes-Benz. Squeezing between the combustion-engined Audi Q5 and Audi Q7 in size, the e-tron range starts at $139,000 and is available in two different shapes and with two different power tunes. Here we're testing the penultimate e-tron 55 in a conventional wagon shape. Now, as most current EV owners can attest, an electric vehicle is only really as good as the charging infrastructure around you. So when I went into this long-term e-tron loan, I did so without any at-home infrastructure. I've purely relied on public infrastructure to get by. Now, the limitations that kind of imposed on me became evident pretty quickly. This car has a claimed range of about 450 kilometers, but a real world range of about 340 k's. So once a week, sometimes twice a week, I've come down here and made use of this public infrastructure. It's not everyone's cup of tea because, as we've found, it takes a lot of time to charge an electric car. Driven by two electric motors, one on each axle, the all-wheel drive e-tron 55 develops 300 kilowatts and 664 newton meters in total, feeding energy from a mammoth 95 kilowatt hour battery. But getting back to charging, officially a 150 kilowatt DC fast charger is claimed to replenish the battery in 45 minutes. We found this 50 kilowatt NRMA system is closer to 2 hours, again giving you about a 340 kilometre range. The e-tron's purchase price does include installation of an 11 kilowatt AC home charger, which goes a long way in sweetening the deal. It means you could hypothetically recharge your car from the garage overnight. But we're leaping into this EV ownership experiment totally reliant on public infrastructure. So one thing I will say, there is a real EV movement happening in Australia. People that own their electric cars are very aware that they're kind of foregoing a little bit of free time, a little bit of effort for the good of the environment, and they are super passionate about it. The sweetener for the e-tron is that it is a really nice place inside the cabin. Firstly, in terms of strictly charging, you have a sort of forecasted time that you're expected to finish charging, irrespective of what you're using, if it's a 150 kilowatt fast charger or a 50 kilowatt fast charger like we're on at the moment. So it's got my total range, as well as the projected time that I'm likely to finish. So that's really good for planning. Otherwise, it is a really cosseting, really Teutonic space and really quite tech laden as well. So if you are sitting in this car waiting for it to recharge, you're going to be doing so with comfort. There's two haptic screens in the middle. One controls your basic infotainment, your media, everything else. And the bottom interface controls all of the climate control. So there's very minimal physical buttons inside the cabin. They're matched by Audi's virtual instrument display, virtual cockpit as they like to call it. It's been around for years and it's still one of the best systems around. The e-tron covers all of our key infotainment requisites as standard. Likewise, the e-tron safety suite is excellent, covering all our bases with well-tuned and sophisticated technology. Okay, so that brings us to arguably the elephant in the room, the most eye-catching feature of this particular e-tron S. It has the optional $3,400 virtual exterior mirrors. So there's a camera on each side. It looks like your external mirror housing is actually broken. It's not, and it kind of shoots back a picture. You can actually move it up and down if you need to. It works quite well. It takes a lot of adjustment. You just got to learn to trust the system. I often find myself looking over my shoulder, probably more than I normally would with traditional mirrors. But in terms of reversing, that's probably the biggest thing. I never realized how much I actually sort of shifted up and down in my seat to be able to see what the wheels are doing. You obviously can't do that with a camera-based system. The e-tron's 4.9 metre dimensions translate to strong second row proportions suitable for adults or little ones alike. There are air vents in the B-pillars and behind the centre console, together with a flip-down armrest, 2 additional USB ports to match the 2 in the front row, plus ISOFIX attachment points on the outbound pews. So one of the things that's really won me over with the Audi e-tron is its physical size. 4.9 metres in length. As I said before, it's sort of neatly wedged between Q5 and Q7. That means there's enough space in the boot area, in the rear seat to kind of work as an everyday family car, but it's not too big that it's at that sort of intimidating size. So the boot area itself, flat floor, bit of a high loading height, but 616 litres altogether. There's a 12-volt outlet here, as well as these handy levers to stow the second row space down. When you do that, you're getting well over 1,300 litres worth of boot space. There's a space saver spare tyre underneath the boot area, as well as a handy storage space for things like picnic rugs. Okay, so this might be a very simple place to start an electric car driving review, but there's a lot to be said about the quietness and almost like the tranquility of an EV cabin upon taking off. It's more pronounced too. I've spent several months with this car, and every time I jump back and forth between this and an internal combustion car, they kind of feel comparatively chaotic and busy inside the cabin with all the vibration, noise and anything else. But pull away from the curbside, the e-tron picks up speed effortlessly. 0 to 100 in 5.7 seconds in this 55 Quattro. But more than that, it's, I guess, the middling accelerations. You can be sitting at 75 k's an hour like I am at the moment. You can just squeeze on the accelerator and it's just a almost boundless surge to as fast as you want to go. The e-tron's limited range and the fact it cannot emulate the visceral rush of an induction engine through the rev cycle means there is very little temptation to explore its straight line performance. Rather, there is more day-to-day enjoyment from the drivetrain's ease of use in all scenarios and its absolute sereneness. Now, dynamics. There is no shortage of new EV models on the market that I would call under-suspended. They're prone to crashing, they're prone to a lot of vertical movement, and just generally they don't have the adequate suspension system to really make do with all the weight on board. This e-tron SUV weighs about 2.6 tonnes and it does an amazing job at just controlling itself over big, drawn-out undulations and over sharp obstacles alike. So for that reason, like, I just went through a huge washout then and just bang, it recovered so quickly and it never really got to the bottom of its stroke. It just sort of hovered through it in one easy motion. For that reason, you're not really getting any thudding, any crashing or anything else, and be that on inner city roads with lots of road joins, lots of bumps, to country roads like I'm on at the moment. This surface is quite busy, it's quite undulating and it's on a pop-marked bitumen. And even so, the e-tron SUV acquits itself really nicely. Dynamically, there's a very digital veneer to all the controls, and there's nothing wrong with it. It telegraphs all its key movements really well, but I think the real saving grace with this car, the real defining feature with it, is that it just balances dynamic wears with comfort really well. The all-wheel drive system is key for that. I think, you know, it's inherently rear biased. It'll call on the front axle if there's a slippage detected or if you're really hooking in, but it means the car feels balanced, it feels really good under power, and it feels just sure-footed as well. The electronics, they're probably a little bit overzealous if you're really going to hook into a corner. You'll know the stability control suite's there because it'll take big chunks away of power if it needs to, but all in all, as a daily driver, this is a really nice place to be. And as I said, you get really used to the EV component because it's so quiet and so serene that everything else feels a little bit busy. In terms of range, so as I said before, 340 k's range in reality. I've found that consistently every time I charge it. The trick with it is it's not
as predictive in its readout as it probably could be. I'll give you an example. Yesterday I went from our place in the mountains down to the coast, so about 600 meters elevation down to zero. When I started the trip, I had 186 kilometers worth of range displayed. When I finished it at the other end, I still had 186 k's worth of range displayed. Then it was time to come home. I went from 186 down to 43 kilometers because the trip was uphill. So I don't know, there has to be a smarter way of giving you a readout so you're not sort of caught out ever, if you weren't really used to this car, caught out with no range, even though you started the journey with plenty. That's probably my only criticism. This car has 3-stage regen brakes. They work really well, and my favourite feature is that they're accessed through traditional paddle shifters. So instead of changing the gearbox, you can go from the easiest coasting setting, which is almost like hovering along in neutral, like an angel gear, to pulling on the pedals. And it really washes off speed quite aggressively, but it's not in a way like Tesla, like others, that comes on so suddenly it makes you feel car sick. It's still done in a nice, linear and progressive fashion. That's the real trick with the e-tron SUV. I think unlike a lot of other EV offerings, it really just floats along really seamlessly. You know, from an ownership perspective, it's a car that you're going to enjoy driving.
Owners will likewise appreciate the after-sales provisions of the e-tron SUV. 6 years complimentary servicing, a 6-year complimentary ChargeFox public charging subscription, and a guaranteed future value, all included. It adds plenty of incentive to the e-tron, a vehicle already offering excellent on-road wears, a bristling interior, and first-rate safety and technology.
Living with the Audi e-tron has taken me into uncharted EV territory. It's probably the first one that I've spent a lot of time with, and it's really convinced me that I could really do the EV thing long term. So much so, I'm now thinking about installing solar panels and charging infrastructure at my own place. But that itself is the trick with an EV. You obviously need all of that set up in your own household to really make it work. For me, I think the clinching factor with this car is probably the price and the range. If it was a bit cheaper and you had probably double the range, then it would really begin to make sense as an everyday vehicle.